Welcome to the NSI podcast, where technology, innovation, and strategy come together to empower today's IT leaders. On today's podcast, we have Trent Townsend, CEO of Next Step Innovation. He takes us through NSI's 18-year journey from the ground up to what we are today. Tell us a little bit about yourself, Trent, away from work.
Away from work.
Like your passions and what you're all about. Who is Trent Townsend?
That's a loaded question, but not a very complex answer. Look, when I'm not working, I like to be around my family. I like to do things with them, enjoy the time that I have, especially with my son. And we do a lot of things outdoors. Myself, honestly, not doing as much with quote friends as I used to. And sometimes it makes me think, do I even have any friends? And I know that I do, but my time is either devoted honestly to work or my family. There are other things mixed in there, certainly, for instance, things like church or that type of thing, other activities. But the majority of what I'm doing is really just spending time with them and working. And I try to balance those out. Sometimes I don't succeed, but most of the time I do. I have a wonderful wife who helps remind me, and also a boss who helps remind me when it's time to slow down and take a break. So.
Okay. Well, I think we all struggle with balance and the era we're in with our kids and things. I feel like in a few years things will change, when they're older and they don't want to hang out with us, those will be sad days, but they're coming, I guess. But so tell us how NSI started. Let's go all the way back. Has it been 12 years?
18.
Where did I get 12 from? 18 years.
18. We do our research on this show, people.
I have 2 degrees. Both of them are computer science, and neither of them are anything close to business. And there was never any intention in my life for my part to open a business, start a business, do anything with a business. I intended to. First I was probably going to be a programmer, and that was fun, and that's what I was going to do. Got a little bit unhappy in life, not with my job, but just where I was in life. Decided to go back to school to kind of get a fresh start, if you will. And that's kind of how I got into security and networking. But never the intention to do it on my own. Really what it comes down to is a former business partner approached me several times, talking about, hey, can we start a business? Can we start a business? And neither of us had any money. And so the answer was always no. I mean, what are we going to do, And it really wasn't until about 6 months before I got married that it happened again. And the idea occurred to me, wait a second, my father-in-law was a little bit of an entrepreneur. And I wonder if he might be interested in backing us financially so we can get started. And that's exactly really, what happened. We went to him and kind of pitched our idea, and it didn't take a ton of money because we didn't need inventory and a storefront and vehicles and all of these things. We really just needed somebody to help us, buy equipment that we sold. So it was very, basic back then, and it was kind of an easy lift once we had someone that did have the amount, some amount of capital to help us fund the operation. Operationally speaking, there were no capital expenses, I guess. So that's how it started. It's a very, very different thing now than what we probably envisioned it to be way back then, in a very good way, but it's far more complicated than I think we ever really thought. And the other thing was talking about not ever intending to run a business. Well, I didn't know how to run a business. And so, again, my father-in-law happened to be, again, he had a couple of businesses that he ran. And so he knew how to do things like, file taxes, and, handle insurance and all of those things, from a business standpoint that you don't really think about, right? You think about doing the job, sending an invoice, getting paid, and then going to the next job. And it's as you start adding people and complexity, it becomes far more difficult. And so he knew how to do that early on and took care of that for us so that we could really focus on actually trying to start a business, and do what it is that we wanted to do.
Okay. Well,
So,
go ahead.
go ahead.
You go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. So kind of take me back. You kind of said how you were getting started, just kind of foundationally, but I'd like to know some of the early days. Like what was it like? Ground zero, just started up. You know, you had self-admitted, I didn't really know how to do, run a business. Like what is that? Like, what's that feel like? Because it's got to be scary, and there's got to be other people, some of our listeners, thinking the same thing. Like, man, I could do it. Like paint a picture to them what that's like.
Well, the first thing I'll say is this, and when you talk to other business owners, other entrepreneurs, there's a common thread, and that is that there's a reason why just not everybody goes out and starts a business, much less keeps it going. And looking back, would I do it again? 100%. Would I change some things? 1,000%. The lessons that you learn along the way really make a huge difference and would have made things so much better. But it's hard. So a thing I guess something to note is that when we started the business in 2007, I was working for the Army at the time, doing cybersecurity, and I didn't quit my job for over 2 years because at the time my wife was still in school, and so I had mine was the only income, and I was not about to trade that for literally a startup and it's months old and take that big of a risk. Could not do that. And so 2 years in, when she finished school and got a job, even though the amount of money she was bringing in way back then was not very much, it gave us a little bit of comfort. Okay, well, if this falls apart, at least we have something. And so in 2009 is when I quit my job with the government to go and do this full time. Now, between those two periods was pretty interesting, because I'm working for the government during the day, and when I come home, I'm working for our company in the evenings. And one of our other partners did the same thing. We actually had one employee, and I remember some of the customers laughing, asking, like, does this guy ever sleep? Because we would all send emails from his email account, doing the work. And so it looked like he was working literally 24/7, like just never stopping. So
best customer service ever.
I mean, he was a good employee, a good teammate, but he also looked like Superman, just constantly on the go, always working. But it was interesting because if you ask, okay, what was the idea? The idea at the time was, as we put it, I'm going to sell this. I'm going to have it shipped from there directly to the customer, and then I'm going to move this piece of paper from this side of my desk to this side of my desk and send an invoice, and that's it, right? You drop ship everything you sell. You work off of valid purchase orders. There's very little risk and very little overhead, and that's all fine and great, but it's hard to scale by just doing that. It's hard to make a difference, right? I mean, especially when people stopped buying, as many things like servers and storage and stuff like that. People still buy client systems, and that's fine, but you can't really make a big impact both in terms of serving your customers or honestly growing a business and making a team better by selling commodities that the margin is thin and there's really no services attached to them. So, I mean, that's great, and it worked. And again, when you have one employee and no overhead whatsoever, and that's what you're doing, well, that's sustainable. And way back then, I think the first year we lost a little bit of money. After that, we actually started making money. But it's a whole different ball game. We had challenges to overcome back then as well, because it was a different time. Certainly, there was no AI, and certainly, the software applications, cloud-based stuff that you have. I mean, there was no, cloud wasn't really a thing, right? I mean, yeah, sure, there were data centers, but not like there are now. And, I don't even think that like Salesforce was around, or if it was, it wasn't something that was, what it is today. And so we had to figure out, how to keep records. And we're all living in different places too. So, we're not all coming together in an office working out of our house. So how do we, not duplicate data and know what invoices, have been sent out and know what's been ordered and all of these things? That was a big challenge back then. And I've talked to a lot of people. We even had friends of ours that were, one guy was a marketing, he started his own marketing company and did a few things for us, and would never send us an invoice. I'm like begging him to send me an invoice because I want to pay him and I want to support him. But there are a lot of people that love the work that they do, but running the business is where they fail, right? They can't do the job and also keep up with all the bills and all the invoices and all the stuff that goes on. And so those were probably some of the challenges we had to face, because we also didn't want to go out and, we didn't have, investors dropping, $40 million or something like that, telling us to go do this thing. We didn't have an application that we'd been working on and someone, venture capitalists come in and drop a ton of money and we off to the races. This was very much bootstrapping ourselves. I think that you said this, Rich, once upon a time, we grew by brute force. We had no plan either. And I think in the early years, it's when you're doing what we were doing and not knowing anything about business, it's probably hard to have a plan. But we kind of let that persist probably for far too long. And there are reasons why that I don't necessarily get into because they're not really relevant to this. But some of those early difficulties probably held us back from being probably what we could have been much, much more quickly. That's a long answer, but does that help kind of give you an idea of what it was like back then? I mean, it was definitely interesting, and there were days too where I'm at home and, I'm thinking, well, what do I need to do right now? I don't even know because there's not a lot going on. And that thought blows my mind now, but back then, I mean, like
I was about to say,
I'm going to watch some TV for a second, for 30 minutes. And I don't have anything much going on, or whatever.
Yeah,
that definitely doesn't happen now.
Yeah, it'd be kind of hard to imagine. Like, I think a lot of people are that way. A lot of business owners. It's like you go through that moment of like trying to figure out what you're going to do, and then all of a sudden, if you're getting success, it's like, God, there's a piece of me that wishes they could go back and have some of that time back in my life. Well, let me shift gears a little bit. So I know that. You came from the federal space and you did cybersecurity, and I'd imagine that's would have led to you working with the federal government today in cybersecurity. What was that? Because there's a lot of people who try to get into doing federal work, but it's not very easy. I mean, I think you even know how hard it is. What was that like? How did you get that first contract or that first job or gig or whatever you want to call it? And, just what's that process like working for and with the federal government?
Well, so you're right. So I was working doing, what we would call cybersecurity back then, especially at least in the government, they called it information assurance, right? That's not so much the case now. Now everything is cybersecurity, which I used to despise that word. I thought it sounded, like it came out of the movie Hackers or something, just kind of cheesy.
Kind of gimmicky.
Yeah, it is what it is now. Now it doesn't really feel like that because it's so ubiquitous in conversation and life and everything. But my job with the government, I really liked. I had a whole lot of upward mobility. I had good leadership, and I probably would have never left the government had it not been for the shot to try this and see what would happen. But I made a lot of good contacts and still had a lot of friends and that type of thing. And when I went over to Next Step, probably a year, I don't remember how long it was. I'm going to say a year and a half or so. I had a former colleague reach out to me and ask, hey, look, so back then there was a certification and accreditation process called DIACAP. And she was saying, I'm going to start this group to become a DIACAP assessment team and looking for people. Can you contract with us? I mean, sure, but how does that even work, right? So to your point, Rich. And so what ended up happening was she put us in touch with a company called HX5. And I was the first on our company to do it, and our company to do it. And we basically became individual consultants for HX5. And so I would go do the work with the government, and the government would pay HX5. HX5 would pay me as an individual consultant. And then I would basically endorse the check to Next Step, and our accountant knew how to handle all that stuff, right? So we didn't get taxed for money we weren't actually getting. And so we started doing that, and we started having more people do it, right? So instead of just me, now it's 3 or 4 people. And HX5 was kind enough to sponsor us to get our facility clearance. And once we had that, and then everybody got their own individual clearances, then we became a subcontractor of HX5, and then we followed that on. I think there were 2 or 3 more contracts that we won, basically doing the same work. There was a year gap in there where we lost a recompete and then got it back the next year. And so we basically were doing what's called DICAP. It moved to something called RMF, which is still what they're doing now, except it's RMF 2.0 these days. But we still do that work, not for that same customer, but we still do it with a different one. And along the way, you have to do all of the things to keep your clearance, to get your clearance, to register with this and do that. The government has a whole lot of boxes to check, and they're not all in just one little portal or something like that. So that's really kind of how it happened, was because a contact that I had known very well when I was with the government wanted me to come and help her team. HX5 kind of did our company a solid and allowed us to do it, and then made us an actual subcontractor. So
that's cool.
So these days, so look, my wife is my boss in more ways than one, but also in terms of the Next Step way, and we are a woman-owned company now, and so there are some advantages you can have to things like that. Other types of set-asides, as they call them, right? So service-to-table vet, or minority, or 8A, or whatever. And so the government will sometimes give basically contracts dedicated to those groups. So that kind of helps compete against people besides like the Lockheed Martins, these huge companies of the world. But it's still a hard fight, right? When
Sure.
You're a small company and you haven't been doing a ton of this work over the years, you almost get kind of pigeonholed. So we're trying to figure out how to get out of that box we're currently in.
Gotcha. I wanted to shift gears real quick with one quick question. And I'd like for you to, so we talked about federal work, and we've talked about some of the things you did early on in the company. But I know one of the things, and some of these stories have become legend, I think, around these parts. But I'd like you to describe one of your best physical pen testing stories. I think our audience would really enjoy hearing kind of how you physically break into different agencies to expose their weaknesses and then do reports on that. But if you could give us kind of a fun story from when you and your team were doing a physical pen test for a state agency or something like that, I think that'd be kind of cool.
I'll give you a couple, and I know exactly what you're talking about because it is a story we like to share, because it is kind of funny. It's very interesting.
The story, those stories grow over time too,
Well, I'll give you the real version. Now, what you choose to do with it, and how you choose to embellish, it's up to you. But I will say, I used to do the hands-on security assessment, penetration testing work, and when we started doing that, it was just me, and I was not enough, both in terms of my skill set and my time to be able to do it all. And so I have a friend who works for RSA now, very smart guy, Jack Riley. I called him and said, "Hey, do you want to consult with me and let's start? We've got this contract. We're about to start doing all these pen tests, that type of thing." And so he said, "Sure." And so for years, basically it was it was the two of us doing this work, and we didn't get a lot of physical penetration test requests very often, but when we did, it's always pretty interesting. Now, I will say this: it takes us to be good at that. Takes a special type of person, not a bad person, but one that doesn't get anxiety from what's going on and doesn't get nervous or whatever. Right? It's hard for me to do some of that stuff because I get such a level of anxiety just by trying to, talk to someone and social engineer. That's just not me. But it's very much him. And so there were a couple of instances, we, look, smokers break, smokers doors and stuff like that are easy ways in. And so I remember one time he went in the front and he went in the back of the building. I went in the front and I made it into like a network closet, I think, that was across from a bathroom. And I think he got caught under somebody's desk trying to put a USB key into their computer. There was a time when we both were trying to go into this monitoring operations center, and a guard pulled a gun on us, which we immediately quit everything we were doing and told him, who to call. That got kind of real. But the one that you're talking about is probably the funniest is, and I shan't name names in terms of customers or anything like that. Can't.
Right.
But we definitely put the physical security team on this particular customer on high alert. And every time I would show up for at least a year after that, like they knew that I was there and did not let me do anything. I wasn't even the one that did it, right? I mean, so we're sitting around toward the end of the audit talking with the customer, and Jack, I call him Wes, so his name is Jack. But anyway, Wes had been going around earlier that day and found somebody's badge and had grabbed it and was walking around with somebody's badge, that type thing. And the security guards had gotten a little bit worked up by then. And the customer said, "Look, I'm not going to go with you or anything," but she said that the room where they make the badges is on the second floor. He said, "Noted," and took off. And so we're sitting there talking, hanging out, and probably, I don't know, 20, 30 minutes later, he comes bopping back around the corner and has a badge on it with the customer name, his picture, and what's the Tom Clancy, Jack Ryan was on the name of the badge, and he'd gone up there and so he said what happened was he went in there and there were hundreds of old badges on the floor or something, but the machine right there, he walked over to it, picked up the keyboard, and the password was on the keyboard. So he proceeded to log in and literally print out his own badge, take his picture, and went back down there. And he had his own. I guess he could have given himself access to things. I don't think he did that. But it was pretty funny, and we all got a good laugh out of it. I don't think necessarily anybody got in trouble or anything like that, or no, in terms of the consequences on the physical security team and things like that. But it definitely, it highlighted a risk, and one that was real, and one that they should address. And that was the point. Now, I will say this too, for the people that do penetration testing or that want to do penetration testing, whether it be physical or, from a technology standpoint, there's a fine line, and even customers listening, there's a fine line that you have to ride when doing a pen test, right? It's just like any other audit, but it's a little bit different. If you're an accountant and you are auditing someone and you're looking for stuff, you're looking at numbers, you're doing these things. You're not, for instance, sending in fake invoices to see what they do, right? You're looking at what they have and what they're doing. With a penetration test, a lot of what you're doing, part of it depends on how they react to things. Part of it, if you're not good at what you do, you don't find anything. Well, either they're really, really good or you literally aren't. And so we always feel like there's this obligation to find something. Unfortunately, most of the time it's not that hard, but to find something. But of course, when you do that, you make somebody look bad because someone should have fixed whatever it was that you found. And so there's this weird kind of situation where, again, if you're doing a good job, you're making someone look bad. they asked you to do it, and your intention is not to make them look bad, but there is a little bit of a game involved, right? I mean, it's, and I remember sitting around one night working, and I got into something. I was like, yes, I was excited. And my wife looked over at me and got mad. She's like, you're going to make her look bad. I'm like, no, that's not, and we proceeded to have this kind of philosophical conversation about what we were doing. So
2
it
a.m.
is
philosophical conversations with your wife are always fun, right?
well, and so along those lines, I mean, I think that we're good at what we do. I think the key is to, when you find the good things, make sure you highlight those, right? If they do catch you or they do see something or whatever, make sure you point those out as well. That's just as important, I think, as the bad things, especially if it's things like monitoring systems that caught you. But look, there have been times where I did a security audit for a customer, and he didn't tell anybody that I was there. He put me in an old guard shack at an abandoned gate of the facility, and that's where I worked for a week. I literally would pull up, walk in there, plug in, and nobody knew I was there for the entire. I got into basically everything, and nobody knew I was there until finally, like the last day, like I really started, swinging around a sledgehammer, trying to be as conspicuous as possible. And I think finally that they noticed. But sometimes it's different. Sometimes it's fun. You're not always, I mean, I've had people literally just looking over my shoulder for 4 days while you're working, which is really annoying. But they want to watch everything you're doing, and that's fine. But so it always varies. These are very, very different. These days it's maybe not quite like that, because most of what we do now is done remotely. We're not going on site as much as we once did. And so you lose that element of it. But the early days, for sure, it was definitely fun. I mean, and you never knew where the lines were going to be. What are your lanes, or what that I need to stay in, right? Because sometimes they're basically just like, you do whatever you want, and sometimes it's very, very specific. So
Interesting.
that's a story.
I like that. I hadn't heard that story, so that's a new one for me. Well,
we're gonna
yes. Well, we're gonna switch gears, and I have a question. What sets NSI apart from the competition in our industry? What would you say? I always think about that, and I was wondering what your answer would be for that.
Well, so I think that probably in this case, all right, look, you think about what sets apart companies in general, right? Mm-hmm. Generally speaking, it's going to be either the people you have, the product that you're selling, or some, awesome processes, things like that, right? I guess it could be cost, but most of the time that's not going to be such a differentiating factor that it like sets you apart. Because if you're doing that, then you're probably honestly not being as profitable and successful as you could be. And so, at least at this point, we don't have a product that we offer to our customers that is ours. Not to say that we're not working on that, because we are, but we're not making and selling widgets that are better than the next guys, or that have better research, or that have this, that do this or whatever that someone else's don't. So you say, all right, well, so we can't rely on a product that's just better than everybody else's. And so that can't be it. And so we've always said, okay, what is our product? Well, our product has to be our customer service and our support and our engineering. That's what we are. Otherwise, we're just selling somebody else's stuff. I mean, the Dell computer that I sell you, or the HP, computer that I sell you, is the exact same one that other guy was going to sell you, right? So it's not like I'm selling you a better product if we're literally selling the same thing. But what it comes down to is what if we aren't selling the same things, right? What if you come to me and say, I need to do X? Well, an option is to over engineer, oversell, and give you way more than you need because maybe you don't know any better. An option is to basically really kind of lowball it and go in as cheaply as possible, selling what I would classify as unqualified products and services, that type thing. We don't try to do either of those. I think that our goal is to really, I mean, honestly, develop a relationship with our customers so that we can have the conversations and get down to what it is that they need and make sure that we understand and they don't get annoyed at us for asking and they take our calls, so that we really can develop a design of something. Now, many times the design of that something is a bunch of different products, configured to work together. So that's I think one part, right, is trying to really deliver value and exactly what the customer needs, and do it in a way that, look, our CFO said this, and I love it. And you may have already shared it on one other podcast, but we're selling an experience, right? And so if our customers have a fantastic experience, and then we follow that up with exceptional service delivery in terms of the engineering or the sales process or the project management, and the customer comes away thinking that was easy. It didn't cost a lot. It does exactly what I want. Those guys are nice. They're easy to work with. That experience is, I think, it has to be what sets us apart. Now, there are probably thousands of other companies that will say the exact same thing, and that's fine. But I'll tell you that in our experience, when we go in, and let's say that we come in behind another company and we do something faster or different, there's sometimes surprise, like, oh, you're already doing this. I expected this to take a couple of weeks or something like that. And so that is a real thing. And so, but I think, our CFO nailed it the best. I think what we sell is our experience. And if our customers walk away thinking, man, I want that to happen again, then that definitely sets us apart.
Well, I love that answer, Trent. That's a good illustration of NSI for sure. Who would you say your biggest influence or mentor is right now? Or
well, right now, honestly, I'm right now, probably we'll call it I'm in between.
I'm in between mentors right now.
Yeah, looking for one. If you're willing, I've got an ad in classified paper. Just give me a call.
Craigslist.
Yeah. No, that's the truth though, and the reason is because if you think about how much we've changed and how much technology, not to mention the rest of the world, but how much things have changed, and when you start talking about, again, my mentors in the past were, I still consider this one gentleman to be my mentor. In fact, I reached out to him the other day. I had talked to him in a long time, just to see how he was doing and want to catch up with him. The best boss I've ever had, for sure, until my current boss. My boss now is better than he was. No, from a mentor perspective, especially, and from someone who cared about my growth and helping me learn, and I was young then too, for sure, right? This gentleman's name is John West. He was the director of the center at the time, an awesome guy. I learned a lot from him, and that's one of the problems with, I think, one of the few problems with when we started the business. Of course, he had already moved on by then. From being my boss, but I lost touch with him after a while. And starting a business, not knowing anything about it and not knowing what to do, for a long time I didn't have any mentors. We were just, it was fight or flight. We were just doing everything we could to keep our head above water, to throw another analogy at you. But these days it is a little bit different. I'm not sure that I have a single mentor right now. I do have probably a group of people that I really look up to that in certain aspects are way ahead of us. And there's things that we want to do as a company. And I can go to these guys and say, hey, what do you think? What are you guys doing? How does this work with you? They're not 100% like us, and so that doesn't always work. But basically other business owners that I've kind of connected with over the years. So I don't think there's really a single person right now. But I will say this, we're really, really fortunate to have what I consider to be, just fantastic people for our leadership team. And so, when we have questions, I think most of the time when we get together and talk about it, we come to an answer that is, first of all, as people, and when you talk about your own convictions and morals and things like that, as people, we're all, on the same page completely. And so it helps from that perspective. We all have different experiences, different areas of expertise. And so collectively, I think we do a pretty good job. So I honestly don't feel like many times I need to call someone and ask them what to do. That doesn't happen too terribly often anymore. And I think it's because of the people around me and the team that we have here. It really is just an excellent group. So.
Yes. I know I asked you about your mentor, but I'm lucky enough to consider one of the leadership team members my mentor that has really influenced my my growth in the company as well. So I'm lucky to stand beside him and work with this company. And also I feel like the influencers age we're in with podcasts and things like that help as well. Like I like to follow Greg Crochet, his business podcast, and he's a good, I would say, mentor, to listen to, even though I don't get to talk to him back and forth. It's still nice to take notes. It's easy to find a, mentor that way this day and age now.
So I got a question. So you've been in business for 18 years, right?
Not 12.
Not 12. Hey, don't feel bad, Cassie.
I'm getting on my numbers.
Some days, it's like, yeah, we've been in business about 10 years or so. And you're like, what? But that number changes sometimes. But, I know the company, it's jumped in revenue probably quite a bit from when you started. I think, some of your best years are around 25 million. What was a turning point? Where was there a moment that you'd say this was a pivotal moment in our company's growth trajectory? Did I say that word right? Trajectory? I'm struggling there, but
easy
yeah.
for you to say.
Yeah. Is it?
I think that when you go back to what I was saying earlier, when maybe we didn't have as I'll be kind to myself and say we didn't have as developed of a business plan as we could have, and our strategy probably wasn't as strategic as it could have been.
The strategeries.
Yeah, there's a lot of so what happens is when you're growing little by little, and that's what happened to us, right? We grew, but it wasn't like we grew 25% quarter over quarter, something like that, right? That would be nice, but it didn't happen. And so you end up having all these little moments, right, where you made the right decision, it worked out, or you got lucky. And you have all these things that kind of come together. I look back and honestly, I think about some of the things that didn't happen that were just as big as some of the things that did. Because we learned, and we almost learned a couple of lessons the hard way. We found that sometimes just being ignorant of a fact or a situation is not a good excuse, and so you had to learn it, right? We luckily it didn't cost us, but it could have. Again, it's some of the things that you just have to figure out on your own, I guess. But I think probably I'll say this. I think one of the most impactful decisions that we've made thus far, the single decision really was probably when we had a change in ownership. Not to say that our former partners are bad people, or that they were trying to do things wrong, or we didn't like them, or didn't get along, or all these things. because all of that, none of that is accurate. I think really what it comes down to is the goals individually of the partners were all in different places. And so it made it hard to really, in some ways, it made it hard to have a good strategy because you had competing interests. Think people wanted different things than everybody else, and none of us were really on the same page as it pertained to that. And so probably the biggest decision that I think at least helped the health of the company, and I think the health of the company, what we've done since then, are bearing fruit and still will. But it's when we made the changes in the partners, and now the group is, again, I mentioned it before, but very much lockstep with each other. Are there disagreements sometimes? Of course, but not ones that I think are impactful to a large degree for sure. And we all want the same things, and we're all willing to invest our time and our energies into getting those things. And that's what's going to make a difference. We're all, as they say, you're all rowing in the same direction. We were not at all before. And again, former partners are great, but we just weren't on the same page.
Gotcha. I'm going to shift gears a little bit, and many times as your company progresses, you have to make certain decisions, and sometimes it involves capital expense or involves time and expense and things like that. One of the things that Next Step has done is they've really built a lot of their applications that they use in-house, whether it be their ERP or their CRM. And I know you're really the lead developer on all of that, which is pretty amazing in and of itself. How do you make the decision as a CEO on these large expenditures, when you bring it in house and you do it yourself? And again, you've got the advantage and the luxury of being able to create those things yourself, right? Not all CEOs have a app dev team, or at least the ability to do that themselves. But there's other things that they have that they could do themselves, or they could outsource. When do you make that decision, and how do you go through and make that decision on, okay, I'm either going to build this myself, or I'm going to do something that's custom off the shelf, right? Or I'm going to outsource this to, contractors or to consultants, or I'm going to take this mission on myself and keep this in-house. How do you make that decision on what to relinquish to somebody else, or when to keep it in-house?
Well, I think part of the answer to that, in a big way, is the timing for us. So we do use a fairly considerable application that kind of runs various parts of the business. And at the time in 2007, again, there wasn't a lot that I knew of that could do that, and the tools that were out there, the former partner didn't like them and wanted them to be better. And so I said, okay, well, give me 3 months and let me see what I can come up with. Right.
Sure.
Again, because I had been a programmer for WorldCom. Now, am I as some great programmer? No. I did it long enough, I think, to be probably pretty good at it. But in terms of the practices and the way you do things and the life cycles and things like that.
So let me stop you right there. Did you just say you used to work for WorldCom?
Yeah, I did.
Maybe we could circle back to some of those stories. I bet people would find that interesting. That might be for another day, but
there are a couple of interesting stories. The only thing I'll say is, remember when I said I wasn't happy in life? One of the reasons I was working for WorldCom, and it was blowing up.
I think a lot of people were happy in life right then.
I tried to get them to lay me off, right? So if I get severance and go back to school, but they wouldn't do it. So I just had to. Anyway, so the thing about it is, for us, there was a big aspect of timing, meaning that back then there wasn't, there weren't all of these different tools and all of these things that you have now. We use, a credit card platform that probably didn't exist, 4 years ago, right? Or HR platform didn't exist 5 years ago, that type of thing. They're both very, very popular now, but they weren't there then. And so, part of it's that, right? But I think the other thing is because we've looked at replacing, some of the in-house things we've developed, and there certainly is a cost associated with implementation. There's a cost associated with, ongoing maintenance. And, when you look at those and say, and look, at one point I said, I don't care anymore. You guys make the decision. Told CFO that you make the decision, you tell me. But he looked at it the same way I did, and that was, well, in the first 2 years, we'll spend, $120,000, which is a lot of money. $120,000 to get this thing. And so we were so much closer to having it with what I did. Now, look, the problem is this. The problem is when you don't pay $120,000 over 2 years, it takes you a long time to get really what you need. And so it has to come over time. And so we end up having to do is put the fires out and change the flat tire. But if there's a knocking in the engine, well, it may just knock for a little while because there are other things that you can do, or a knocking in your trunk, like your car. But anyway, and so look, it all comes down to this: is what tools are out there, what software, whatever you're going to use. How well does it fit the way you operate? Are you going to have to mold your business around it, or does it mold around you? Obviously, how much is it going to cost, and what's the investment if you do something in-house versus if you buy a product versus if you make some other thing just work, right? There's a lot of open source stuff that you can use. We use open source for a long time, and it served its purpose for a while. Eventually, a lot of the things we were doing, we said, okay, no more. This is not good enough. We need to start. We need to get something else, and so we chunked it and started paying monthly fees to go in, and have these other things. I can name a whole bunch of things, right? Our ticketing system, our email, our chat client. All these things we used to do ourselves, we don't anymore, right? There's a ton of them. Even things like keeping up with PTO and doing payroll, all this stuff. And eventually, you determine this is better, and it's worth the cost. Both in terms of benefit to the employee, benefit to the customer, how much time it's going to save, how much easier, how much better is that person's life that's doing it now? If we go and do this, what's their life going to be like? Because that's worth some chunk of that 120,000. So, it's all about, right, the cost benefit, analysis. But I think a lot of it has to do with.
I was going to say on that, you have not only do you have options, but because you have so many options now, you also have competition, which has driven some of that price down, right? Mm-hmm. So there's always that big, that big company when you're starting out, when you were starting out, but you didn't have a lot of options. So that was always very pricey. So, you almost had to go in-house.
And, the thing about it is, and I was thinking about this morning, actually, it's weird, right? So at this point, we have so much data over the things that we've done over the years. And there is this thing that is actually useful to people that, and look, for better or worse, we have used this thing for 18 years. And, we've made money, we've stayed in business, and we've grown. And so it can't be all bad, but there are definitely things that I wish I could change. And I look at things that I did in 2007 and think, what was I thinking? So there's also this kind of maintenance thing you have to go through.
Sure.
But if I had to do it again, if we started now and we're and had the same decision to make, but with the software and the options and things that are available now, probably wouldn't do it. There's too many tools that would probably have worked just as well. Our business would operate slightly differently. Some of the things that we do would be different. But given the options now, probably wouldn't do it again. Not to say it wasn't worth it, but just a different time.
Yeah. And, And Cassie, you and I have gone through this where we'll look at applications, especially from like a marketing standpoint, right? And you talked about that the one ERP application was going to cost 120,000, just and that's just for the licensing. Yeah, but that's just it gets you the platform, right? You've got to learn the platform. You've got to typically in any of those situations, you have to hire a team of consultants to come in, set it up, get it set up the way you want it set up, right? And so there's a lot more cost than just the licensing for the applications and the support. Usually there's a lot of time, energy, and and I always think back to when you were making that decision, and I was, because there's sometimes I'm just like, man, should the CEO be in the lead software developer on this? But
Well,
you were still going to have to spend so much time with consultant website, and I felt, Cassie and Trent, I think you both agree. I felt like we did did we do more work than the website developers? Because sometimes I feel like who's doing all the work, putting this website together.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, I think about that when I think about what you were doing. I was like, you know what? He may have had to put the same amount of time into it. But go ahead.
Yeah, a lot of groundwork,
definitely wouldn't be the same amount of time. But what I have to remind people is that I do still enjoy doing technical things, and it's not like that's all that I work on. You still there?
You're breaking up a little.
Right. I think one of the things that you were talking about was, and I've noticed this about you, and people have asked me, they're like, why does he do some of that? And I'm like, you know what? He still likes to code. He enjoys the challenge of putting these things together.
I've always liked problem solving, and that's just an aspect of it, one way to do it. And so, there are times when literally, this is going to sound really, really corny, I guess, or whatever, but
bring the corny.
And I don't feel like, I'm just tired of the day, and I don't feel like starting another big thing, and I'm frustrated. I'll make us sit down and start reviewing some of the code, because okay, look, that's a break for me, right? That's something that I enjoy doing, and that gives me a little bit of respite from whatever else was going on. So it's not like I'm doing that, every day in and day out. But I still enjoy it. So it's a thing that if we decided not to do it anymore, that would be okay. But I would, there'd be a piece of me, and I have to find something else to do to replace that need to do something technical, right? To continue to learn. So.
Well, I feel like it would be such a heavy lift of training all the employees as well. I can think of one individual. I don't know how he would deal with that big change, but but we have implemented quite a few systems over the years that have made the business run a lot smoother. So what is your strategy for building and maintaining a strong company culture? What would you say?
Well, first of all, I'll say this, that now and for the last several years anyway, probably now 3 or 4 or 5 years, we haven't, to my knowledge anyway, haven't had any kind of problem individuals, right? And so that's, first of all, that's something that we shoot for. The culture within the company is among the most important things to Rachel and to me. And we look at it like this, and I would tell anybody this really, I guess, but our priority as a company is to our employees, because we understand that if people have to work, if I have to work, which I do, then I, just like you guys and anyone listening, if you have to work, you deserve to at least do something you enjoy, right? Or if and if you don't have that, then go find it. And so we want that for our team. We want them to enjoy working with us. We want them to enjoy working with each other. And we know that if they're happy, which again, that's our number one priority, what's going to come of that is our customers are going to be happy too, and so that's kind of the way that we approach things. And so it's a little bit harder to do that when we're probably 90% geographic, like 90% work from home, right? I mean, we have just such a small number now that actually go into an office every day. Part of because of COVID, part of just natural, the way things naturally happen. So it's harder to do that because you don't get that face-to-face interaction. But I think still that our individual teams still do a good job of maintaining the relationships, that people care. The people that we hire, we want it to be obvious that they're going to care when they come on board. And then we do try to do things, we talked about the crawfish bowl and things like that. I mean, that's people coming to our house. That's people literally walking through my bedroom and going into our bathroom, because our house is weird. We only have 2 bathrooms, long story. But I mean, like, does it get any more, truthfully, I mean, does it get much more, I'm not going to say intrusive, I'm not going to say intimate, I can't really think of the right word, but, like, I can't offer you much more when you come to my house than to, look, go in there, walk past my bed, go into my bathroom, go use that, or go over there to my kid's bathroom, or whatever. These people come to our house, and we love doing it. But I hope that, and I think that it does. I had one person tell me as much, this last one. I hope that people realize that that's how we are, and that's who we are. We're not a family business anymore, but we want everyone to feel like that they represent something that's good, and that they can talk to us and make it feel like a family. It's really cool to see people interact, especially those that have never met each other before, and you go to these type of events or have these type of events. It's really cool to see them and to see them laughing, to see their kids playing, all of those things. So, from a culture perspective, the one lesson that that's all kind of who we are. But the lesson that I did learn was when you identify someone that's killing, because one person can kill, I mean, I'm talking about not the entire company's culture. If you don't handle that, is when you find that you've got to get rid of it. And if that means you have to, pay severance to let somebody go or whatever. I mean, you can't do things that are illegal in terms of letting people go. But I tell you what, killing a culture is a reason to let someone go. Because I've walked out of my office one day, and people were screaming at each other at the top of their lungs, and I stopped them, and then I sat down and I had to think, what do I even do? Because I never experienced that and didn't expect it, and so I wasn't prepared. And we fixed that real fast, though. Only happened one time, and nothing like that. I'd be shocked if it happened again. If it did, then I'll say it again. It's not going to happen. We'll take care of it then. So don't let it grow bad, and put forth an effort to let people know who you are and that you do care, and that you are just, you're just another person. If you're a leader, a manager, and if you're a teammate, then, let people get to know you and understand who you are. And you're not just a face on Zoom or Teams or whatever it is that you're doing these days. Because it matters. I think relationships are what keep a company's culture well. I mean, if I don't know the two of you guys, this conversation's a lot weirder,
Right.
Well, definitely a lot more uptight. Let's put it that way, right?
No, it just was like, I could have inserted a joke there, but I was like, nah. But yeah.
Just let it go. Just let it go.
So, I feel like you answered this, but what qualities do you value most in NSI employees?
Culture fit is definitely at
Yeah.
the top of the list.
Yeah.
You can be a rock star and could be all the best at what you do on the planet. And if you're a huge pain in the rear end, you're not going to, it's just not going to last because people are going to hate you. But it's just not worth it. I'll settle for the second best person on the planet if they're a cultural fit. So that's number one, is they have to be a good fit. I think the other thing is, um, so I mentioned earlier that I used to do the penetration testing and stuff like that, right? Um, and I was okay at it. Hire people that are smarter than you, right? So we've got a bunch of people that are way smarter than I am that do this stuff way better than I do, to the point that I don't do it anymore. I think that's a big thing in that, at least for me, I know that I'm not the smartest person on the team. I know that I'm not the smartest person in the room. I don't want to be that. I would rather listen and let people work things out, come to their conclusions, find answers, that type of thing. And most of the time they do. But, so cultural fit, having really intelligent people that, again, that number two, the second point doesn't just ruin the first, right? If you're a really intelligent person, you can be a horrible cultural fit, but we've found, I think, the right mix. And then lastly, people that I don't have to micromanage. Um, I don't want to tell you how to do your job. I don't want to watch you do your job. I don't want to make sure you're doing your job right. I want to trust that you are. And when there's a problem, come to me, right? And so I think those three things, if you find people that are, and look, that sounds like a dream, a cultural fit, super smart person, and don't be micromanaged. Well, yeah, you can't go wrong. Well, sometimes it is what it is.
Where do you find those people?
Yeah, but that's the answer, right? Those are the things that I'm looking for, right? In terms of things like skill set or experience, stuff like that. Yes, that's important. But if I have the right person, that those other three things, they can learn, they can figure out how we do things, they can advance the company, and still not necessarily have done whatever it is we need them to do for the last 20 years. So experience that's important. But again, someone with all the experience in the world, if they don't have those three things, then especially number one and number three, no, not interested.
So, been a CEO for quite a while now. You've you worked at WorldCom. Need more stories about that later, but you worked for the military and cybersecurity. You've kind of really devoted your life to information technologies in one form or fashion for what probably looks like most of your professional career. What legacy do you hope to leave as a leader in the tech world? Some people, not saying you're getting old, but I mean, as we start looking at the future of, kind of coming to an end professionally, what does that look like? What are you like, man, I'd like for people to think X about me when they think about what I did for technology?
That's a hard question to answer, mainly because um, mainly because my goal in doing this, not to say that I didn't want to impact people or make the world a better place, but my goals weren't based around what people are going to think. And generally speaking, that's not how I frame things in my head. Don't get me wrong. I mean, I don't want people to. I want people to think, yeah, he's a good person. He's a nice guy. That type thing, right? I mean, I want to be thought of well, but whether or not someone thinks I'm successful or not, or whether or not someone thinks that I've earned this or that, or haven't, or gotten lucky or whatever, it doesn't matter to me. I'm not concerned about that. That being said, you know, it's also a hard question to answer because, you know, at this point, our company, I think we've made a lot of customers better. I think we've made a lot of customers happy. We haven't done it by, again, in rare instances, I suppose, maybe we have, but we haven't done it, generally speaking, by some original idea or original implementation, something that never been done before, right? We just tried very hard to do it better than everybody else, and again, and give the customer a good experience. So it's also hard to say, well, you know, they created this or they created that, because we really didn't. You know, we took things that were out there, put them together intelligently, wrapped it in a big bow of customer service and a smile, and, you know, presented it to the customer. And so I think from a professional standpoint, you know, I think if we can walk away, you know, and this is more of a, maybe it's a business thing, I don't know, but if we can walk away from the business, whatever that looks like, if that looks like, you know, going out of business or selling the business or letting somebody else run it, whatever that, I don't know, who knows. But if I can, at the end of the day, walk away and say, you know, we did it the right way. We had some great people. We had some really great things that we did. And you know, and I can not, I mean, honestly, I can sleep at night and not have to worry about what I'm going to do when I'm 85. Then that's probably my goal. But you know, I do want people to look at our company and say, you know, that they are a good company. They were a good company, whatever, to work with. We enjoyed working with them. They had a lot of great ideas. They did some great stuff for us. They advanced our technology, that type of thing. So again, if people look at our company and say, we were good, we did have a great experience, we were smart, then I'm good. For my own personal thing, I mean, I'm not so, maybe bold's the right answer, but I'm not so bold to think that I'm going to, like, you know, impact technology, right? I'm not going to, you know, come up with the next, you know, I don't know, encryption algorithm that changes the world. You know, it's not going to happen. It's not my goal. So I'm more interested in what people think of our company, when, you know, and again, and hopefully they view it in a good light. They want to work with us. They like us. They, you know, they haven't had that bad experience. So it's not really an answer. I'm sorry, but that's just what I think.
So what I heard is that you're working on an encryption algorithm that's going to change the.
Tried to spin that the other way, but yes. No,
no, I'm just messing with you. No,
look, I mean,
think it's a great answer.
If I could, I
mean,
would.
It's real.
It is real, you know.
Yeah. Those are the best answers for sure. Cassie, do you have anything else you wanted to talk to Trent about?
I don't think so. Thank you so much, Trent, for taking the time and talking with us. I know the listeners will enjoy it, hearing a little bit more about Trent.
Well, if anyone's made it this far through this thing, then you know what? God be with you. You have shown some incredible patience and perseverance. But no, I appreciate you guys doing this, and I've enjoyed listening to them. I'm not through all of them yet. I'm still finishing up the last one, but looking forward to what we can do. And yeah, thank you all very much.
Thanks. Bye.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Thank you for listening to the NSI podcast. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and share the episode. Got questions or topics you want us to cover? Reach out. We'd love to hear from you. For more information, visit us at nextstepinnovation.com.